Hey everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. This is the fourth and final championships quarterfinals match, Ludwig versus Logic, and this is game 2. Logic leads 1-0. If you missed the first game, check it up there. It's a nice short little miniature, and this is a very nice game as well. So Ludwig does need to win this in order to take us to a tiebreaker. He is the rating favorite and the match favorite. At least he was at the start of the match. I don't know if he's the match favorite after he's down 1-0, but let's just see how this game went. We have e4 from Logic and d5 from Ludwig going for the Scandinavian defense, which is very aggressive. We have e takes d5 and queen takes d5, knight to c3 and queen to d6, bishop c4 and knight to f6. So we saw Ludwig sort of go for this kind of setup against his in his match versus Moist Critical as well. We have knight to f3 and now a6, just continuing this Scandinavian setup. More principled would have been to develop a piece, but this a6 move, it's very thematic in the Scandinavian, so it is okay as well, just preventing any white piece from coming to b5. We have d3 now and b5 from Ludwig, and here we have bishop d5 from Logic, and this is not a good move because it hangs a bishop. There's 2 attackers, and there's only one defender, so here you needed to play bishop b3 as Logic. But we have bishop d5, and will Ludwig now see this hanging piece? Yes, he does. This is the championship bracket. We don't miss hanging pieces, except when we do. But Logic is now down a piece. Ludwig is up a piece. So let's see if Ludwig can convert this now. Ludwig, I will note that he was up a piece in the first game, but he still ended up getting checkmated. So, anything can happen. We have knight e4 now from Logic hitting the queen, and the queen goes back to d8. Very fine. We have castles now and bishop to b7, continuing development. We have knight to c5, hitting that bishop, and bishop to c6. A very fine move. We have knight to e5 now, hitting the bishop again, though it is defended this time. Probably better would have been simply a developing move from Logic. This knight is already developed. You don't really need to move it again. And we have e6 from Ludwig, preparing to get that dark squared bishop out. We have queen f3 now and queen to f6, offering the queen trade. Ludwig is up a piece, so he's definitely okay with those trades. And here we have knight to e4, and this hangs another piece. So along with this queen to f6 move, not only are you offering a queen trade, but you're threatening this knight on e5. So you got to do something about that. You could trade queens yourself. You could take this bishop on c6 first. But knight to e4 does not save your knight. So this does hang another piece, and Ludwig definitely takes that with queen takes e5. So now Ludwig is up 2 pieces. This should be fairly simple to convert. He just has to get his king safe and trade off the remaining pieces. We have d4 now and queen to f5. Ludwig is once again okay with those trades. We have knight to g5 and Ludwig going for those trades. Queen takes f3, knight takes f3, and knight b4. Now threatening another trade and also this c2 pawn. We have bishop f4 from Logic, continuing development, and Ludwig goes for that trade. Bishop takes f3, g takes f3, also doubling white's pawns. Very fine moves from Ludwig. We have bishop d6 now, offering another trade, and Logic goes for this. Bishop takes d6, c takes d6. You really shouldn't go for this trade here. Even a move like, bishop g3 is better, or because then at least if black trades, you get to fix your pawn structure. So on the other hand, if you don't initiate this trade, I just noticed this now, you will lose this c2 pawn. So maybe that's why Logic went for this trade, and that is totally makes sense. It's justifiable. But we do have bishop takes c6, c takes d6, and now c3, saving that c2 pawn. Ludwig saves his knight, knight 4 to c6, and rook f to e1, getting that rook on the half-open file and lining it up with black's king. We have castles from Ludwig and now d5, looking to break in the center. Here, knight to e5 would have been fine, but instead we have e takes d5, which is a fine move as well. It just sort of weakens your pawn structure a little bit because now you will have these double isolated pawns. But you're still up 2 pieces, so it's probably going to be fine. We have rook a to d1, now pressuring those d pawns, and b4 from Ludwig. We have rook takes d5, Logic now takes that, and b takes c3, b takes c3, and now h6 from Ludwig. We have rook takes d6, picking up that d6 pawn, and now rook a7. We have rook to e4 from Logic, and rook d7, now forcing this rook trade. So the rook has no safe squares. A rook trade will occur. So Logic initiates it with rook takes d7, knight takes d7, and now we have f4. We have knight to f6 hitting that rook, and rook to c4 hitting hitting Ludwig's knight. We have knight to e7, Ludwig saves his knight, and king to g2, Logic activating that king in the endgame. We have rook to c8 offering a rook trade, but Logic is not interested. He plays rook to a4, going after this a pawn. However, this hangs the c pawn, but if both players take the pawns, then it will be a fair trade, which that occurs. We have rook takes c3 and rook takes a6. We have rook to c4 now from Ludwig going after this f4 pawn and rook a8 check. Logic throws in this check. We have king h7. Black simply gets out of the way, and king f3, defending the f4 pawn. We have rook c3 now and king to e2. Knight e to d5 and king to d2, hitting that rook, and now knight e4 check, checking the king and defending the rook. We have king to d1, and now knight takes f4. Now that the king is away from this f4 pawn, and all of our pieces are guarded, we can take this f4 pawn. However, this falls into a skewer, which Logic does play with rook to a4, and this is skewering the two knights. However, black has this really nice defensive mechanism, starting with rook to d3, and after rook to d3, wherever the king moves, we can then check the king again, and even if the king moves to c2, we can simply play rook to d2 check, and then if the king moves to c1, then we have this knight to d3, king b2, rook b2, and it will be checkmate. So it doesn't matter where the king moves here. It doesn't matter after this rook d3 check. If the king doesn't attack the rook, then if the king goes to c1, for example, then we have this knight to e2 check, first saving this knight. And now if king to c2, we have, once again, this rook d2 check, and the white king will move away, and you can save this knight, or you can go for checkmate. Basically, what I'm trying to say is this skewer does not work after rook d3. Logic goes for king to e1, and so he's thinking maybe he'll pick up one of these knights, but Ludwig threatens checkmate now. It's actually a fork on the rook and checkmate with knight to c3. So king to e1 is probably the worst king move, I think, out of all of white's legal moves, because, yeah, now you're threatening this rook, and you're also threatening rook d1, which will be checkmate. So here, really, you have to take this knight as white and just hope that black doesn't see this checkmate. But this is what Logic goes for, because if you don't take this knight, if you play a move like f3, well, then you're just losing the rook, and it's going to be all over. So you kind of have to go for this rook takes f4 move. But unfortunately for Logic, Ludwig did see the checkmate. He played rook to d1, and this is checkmate. So Ludwig takes the second game. Logic loses the second game. And yeah, Ludwig played extremely accurately this game. Logic played really well too, except for those two piece hangs. Yeah, really, those two piece hangs from Logic were the only blunders in this game. Ludwig had no blunders, no mistakes at all. So yeah, very good game. And we are going to be going to a tiebreaker, and whoever wins in the tiebreaker will be moving on to the semifinals. So stay tuned for that. I don't think I have anything else to say about this game. So check out my PogChamps 3 playlist up there, and check out the tiebreaker game over there. Stay awesome. Like and subscribe. Stay subscribed. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.